There are really only three things that you need to do to be able to successfully navigate the interview and application process for the most elite consulting firms. The first one is being able to know how to network and have conversations with the people who you will potentially be working with so you can better understand the job and also build good relationships with the people who will be looking over your application and your resume. The second is being able to make a resume that will actually get you interviews. And then the third one is, once you get those interviews, being able to be really good at casing so that you can do well in the interview. But in today's video, I want to talk specifically about that second point. How do you make a resume that will actually get you interviews? But more specifically, I want to give you three of the most common mistakes that I've always seen in the almost 100 or 150 resumes that I've looked over to help people get these interviews from consulting firms. And after highlighting those three frequent problems, I also want to give you examples of how to make sure you won't be doing the same mistakes. And before we get into the video, I want to talk to you about something really exciting. In the description below, you'll see a Google form. And in it, it'll ask for two things. One is your email, and then second is your resume. If you provide us your email, we'll send you the template of the resume that I and Rohit used to actually get our internship offer from Bain. And then if you upload your resume, then you might be one of the lucky people whose resume is selected for a future video in which we live edit a resume. Of course, taking out like the names and the emails and any personal identification information. But that'll be an amazing way for you to get super thorough feedback that you could even watch over and over again so that you can improve your resume to potentially get an interview with these firms. So make sure to fill that out before you forget. But anyway, let's get into the video. Oh, and of course, for those of y'all who are new, my name is Neel, and in this channel, I make videos sometimes with my friend Rohit, so that way we can help you more confidently apply to elite consulting firms like the big three, McKinsey, Bain, and BCG. And that's largely because we were some of the first people from our school to ever get into one of these firms straight from undergrad. And so we know what it's like to come from a non-target school and think it shouldn't be as hard as it is. Side note, we also love making the videos. They're a lot of fun. Below in the description, you'll find our LinkedIns and our Instagram, so feel free to connect with us there. I only ask that if you add us on LinkedIn, please make sure to send a note. Otherwise, we won't accept the connection request. Okay, so on to today's video. Really, there'll be two parts. In the first one, I want to cover a couple of just more broad, abstract ideas that I think will get you in the right mindset to create a resume that will be successful for these consulting firms. And then after that, in the second part, that's when I'll talk about the three specific problems that I've found time and time again when looking at people's resumes. So diving into the first part, the more abstract, higher level thoughts. The first one is that you have to realize who is looking at your resume. Oftentimes people think it's only recruiters or HR people, but that's really not true. Oftentimes the people who are looking at your resume the most are going to be consultants themselves, whether they are entry level, and when I say entry level, I mean 1 to 2 years out of undergrad, all the way to people who might be 4, 5, 6, 7 years in, so senior consultants or senior managers. Of course, it all depends on where you're applying from. If you're applying from undergrad, so just about to finish college, then the people who are a little bit younger will be looking at your resume, versus if you're applying from an MBA program or a graduate degree and you're applying for the more senior consultant role, then you'll have more of the senior consultants being the people who are looking at your resume and your application. So just this idea is around just make sure you understand who is reading your application and your resume and tailoring it for them. And part of this could mean that you might not have to dumb down language as much because these might be people who came directly from your own university and thus understand the exact clubs and things that you were talking about in your resume. It also comes to a point that I'll highlight later on, which is that you might be able to easily connect with these people, as in go reach out to them on LinkedIn or through email or on-campus visits and recruiting sessions. And thus, if you're able to have a positive interaction with them or conversation, it makes them reading your resume that much more powerful because they can connect the name and the information on that resume to a pleasant interaction they had, and thus be able to much more easily advocate for you. The second piece of advice that I have in this section is something that you should apply, I think, whenever you're applying to literally anything, whether it's a job, whether it's a scholarship, fellowship, whatever it might be, and that is to do the thought exercise of putting yourself in the shoes of the people that you're trying to become. So in this situation, you're trying to become a consultant. So just thinking in the shoes of a consultant, and then what are the incentive structures that they're inside of? For example, consultants need to be good with people and clients and smart so that they can solve problems. And so you need to then use that information, although very basic, and that's not new information to most of y'all, use that information and then make sure that you're highlighting that on your resume by showing that you have extracurriculars, you have a high GPA, you have high test scores, etc., etc. Another example is that as consultants, we need to show to our client that we're driving real results. we can't just tell them what we're doing. We have to tell them why it matters, what are the impacts, what are the numbers that they can expect in terms of increase in profit or whatever it might be. And so with that same principle, you should be able to show in your resume that you can have that same type of skill set of not only just showing what you did, but explaining why it matters. We'll explain a lot more about that specific point in the second part of the video. And speaking of the second part of the video, we'll start it right now. So the 3 most common mistakes that I see whenever I was reviewing resumes for friends, for family friends, and for other people who just needed my help because they were applying to the consulting firms. The first one, and this might be the most important one, it's that people would not answer the so what question. They would often just write something that they did in a bullet point under an externship or an internship or a job opportunity, that they revamped the website or that they put together reports for the president of the company to look at. But just by you telling me that doesn't mean that I know if you actually did anything useful. What I care about more as someone who is reading the resume is not only seeing what you did and that it's impressive, but also that it had impact, that it did something, that it mattered to either the person you were delivering it to the clients that you were serving, whatever it might be. And so I use this so what question as a good filter or a good framing for you to really understand what you need to be saying. So imagine if you were talking to a friend or something and you said, hey, I was the president of the club. They'd be like, okay, cool. Like, why should I care? So what? You know, but then if you say, I was the president of the club and I was really passionate about it, and so I wanted to get more people to be involved in it because I thought that they would be interested as well. And so we increased attendance from 5 to 50, you know, then it's like, oh wow, that's actually pretty cool, man. That's awesome. Good job. You know, and it makes more sense and it concretizes it and shows that you actually did something real rather than just being able to say what you did. And so I actually want to give you a couple examples. I just pulled up a random resume that I found on the internet in front of me, and I want to show you all what I mean. And so reading one of the lines, it says that this person reconstructed the official website design of this company. And so, like, cool, that's awesome, but what was the results of that, right? Like, did it improve customer retention or customer interest? Did it improve conversion rate? Did more people come to the website? Did you win awards for the new design of the website, right? Like, there's so many ways that you can go about explaining and giving me more details about what that actually did in a way that I'm not gonna understand, right? I can't read your mind. I can't examine your life without you telling me what exactly you did. Another bullet point that's on this resume is that they strategized a market entry action plan for a small or medium enterprise in a specific part of the world. And again, that's awesome that they strategized that, but then what was the result of it? Did the company then go and actually implement that entry plan? Did they feel confident, right? Like, what was the actual outcome of that rather than just the process or the action that you took? The second most frequent problem that I often see is that people do not quantify things. And not only that, but sometimes they feel like they cannot quantify things. And I think that's just the wrong attitude. One, from the perspective that as consultants, we are people who have to assign numbers or bring numbers to problems that clients might not have been able to bring numbers to. And with that, we can better make decisions. You know, whether it's sizing a market that no one knows the size of, whether it's trying to figure out what a rough estimate of the cost it might be to implement something, right? Things that, you know, might be pretty tough for you to figure out. You need to be able to do that on the job, and so you need to show that you can do that on the resume. And so again, going back to the examples I gave before, if you revamp the website, mention how many more people are visiting the website now, or mentioning the conversion rate is a great way, right? And sure, you might not have access to specific data, but you probably have a rough estimate, right? And it might not be with that. Another example is if you were the president of a club, or if you led a club, some way, shape, or form, or created one. You could always mention how many more participants were in the club when you left presidency than when you started, the budget increasing, how many more events were hosted, how many more people came to your events, those kinds of things, right? All really easy ways to quantify. And what that does is it concretizes and actually makes the impact that you had very specific. Because if I told you that I was the president of a club versus if I told you I was the president of a club of 150 people, the 150 people bullet would be a lot more impressive and just interesting, right? Because then I'd say like, oh, how would you get that many people? How do you entertain those people? How do you make sure that they get value from the club, right? There's so many more conversation starters that you can have when you're sitting there in that interview. But right, of course, if you don't have a good enough resume, you're not even going to get to the interview. And so I think it's of the utmost important. I think the so what piece of advice that I gave earlier is really important, but this ability to quantify things and assign numbers, even if you think you cannot, is super important as well. I would honestly say, to stress to you all, that you should go line by line on your current resume and ask yourself the so what question and try to answer it in each bullet point, and also provide numbers and quantifications for things. Maybe you might not be able to do that for literally every bullet point, but I think you should have it for a majority of the bullet points, some number or metric or outcome or result that is shown in a number format. And then the last problem that I often see with people, and the last thing that I want to tell to you all, is that people don't complement their resume with the proper in-person or over-the-phone interactions that are needed to really make your resume shine. And what I mean by that is, if you cold apply to these places, they almost have no incentive to really look at your resume unless you are phenomenal, unless you catch someone on a really good day where they want to look at your resume. But if not, then they might not even care, and then they just might go to the next one, even if your resume is awesome. But if you went out of your way, you tried LinkedIning people, showing you're interested, having good conversations, driven by your curiosity, they'd be like, oh wow, that person was really interesting and interested in what we do, and I had a pleasant conversation, so let me look at their resume. Oh wow, their resume is really solid. I see all of the things that they did. Seems like they had a lot of impact. They have a lot of numbers to quantify what they did. It's hard to argue with that being the best way. And to be honest, for me personally, I've gotten both my full-time jobs, both at Bain and then the startup that I work at now, by LinkedIning people first and then applying to things and showing my resume later on. And honestly, in any job that I apply to in the future, I'm never going to apply cold. I'm always going to make sure to talk to people, LinkedIn, reach out to them, and then have conversations. And also, because it's a two-way street, right? You want to make sure that these are the people you want to be working with and putting your time into, and this is the right company for you. If it's not, then you kind of save yourself some time and you don't have to apply, right? And so it helps not only with them being able to better select you for an interview, but then also makes you more confident that you're doing the right thing with your time and energy. And so all that to say, a huge mistake is that most people just submit the resume and then honestly, they're too scared to reach out. But you know, if you want it, you got to do it. And so that's the third thing. And so that was a video. I think that was pretty short, sweet, simple, and concise on the 3 biggest problems that I see in people's resumes whenever I've looked at them. Again, down in the description is a Google Forms. Give us your email, give us your resume. With your email, we will send you all the templates soon enough of the resume that myself and Rohit used to get to Bain. And then if you send your resume, you might be one of the handful of people whom we actually review live your resume piece by piece. We'll email you the personal feedback and then also make it into a video, but of course not identifying who you are or anything like that. It'll be a great way for you and everyone else in our audience to see what it means to actually have a resume vetted by people who have gone through this process themselves. As always, thanks for watching till the end, y'all. If you have any additional video ideas that you want us to do, you know where to put them down in the comments below, but we'll see you next video.